Imagine you've achieved everything you thought you wanted. The promotion, the relationship, the lifestyle that looks perfect on social media. Yet you lie awake at 3 a.m. with a gnawing feeling that something fundamental is wrong. The anxiety doesn't come from your job performance or relationship status. It comes from somewhere deeper, a whisper that you're living someone else's life, following a script written by people who don't even know you exist. This feeling terrifies you because it suggests that everything you've built might be an elaborate performance. You try to silence it with busier schedules, more achievements, or the next purchase that promises fulfillment. But the anxiety returns, stronger each time, carrying a message you're afraid to hear. Most people spend their entire lives running from this discomfort. They medicate it, distract from it, or convince themselves it will disappear once they reach the next milestone. But in the 1840s, a Danish philosopher named Søren Kierkegaard, a brilliant, tortured thinker who spent his short life wrestling with questions of faith and authenticity, discovered something revolutionary. That anxiety you're trying to escape might be the most important signal you'll ever receive. The anxiety that actually helps you. You've been taught that anxiety is always the enemy. Self-help books, therapists, and well-meaning friends all offer the same advice. Eliminate the discomfort, find your comfort zone, achieve balance. But Kierkegaard identified a completely different kind of anxiety, one that emerges not from external threats, but from a startling recognition of your own freedom. He called this feeling angst, different from everyday worry about bills or deadlines. Angst hits when you suddenly realize you could choose differently. You could quit your job tomorrow. You could end your relationship. You could move across the country and start over. You could become someone entirely different from who you are today. Think about the last time you felt this. Maybe you were in an important meeting, nodding along with decisions you disagreed with when it struck you. I don't have to be here. I could walk out right now. Or lying next to your partner wondering, is this really what I want? The vertigo you felt wasn't weakness, it was your mind recognizing its own power to choose. Most people immediately retreat from this recognition. They choose security over possibility, the familiar over the unknown. They tell themselves the feeling was irrational, that they should be grateful for what they have, that wanting something different is selfish. But here's Kierkegaard's insight. This retreat is where you lose yourself. The anxiety you feel when confronting real choice signals that you're approaching authentic living. He famously described it as, anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, like standing at the edge of a cliff, experiencing both the fear of falling and the terrifying impulse to jump. The discomfort tells you that you're finally considering genuine options instead of just following the path everyone expects. Learn to recognize when this deeper anxiety appears. These moments reveal where your authentic self is trying to emerge. The 3 lives most people live. Kierkegaard noticed that people tend to get stuck in one of 3 ways of living, each representing a different relationship with this freedom and anxiety. Understanding these patterns shows you exactly where you might be trapped and why that restless feeling keeps returning. Most people start in what he called the aesthetic stage, living for immediate pleasure and new experiences. Aesthetic people chase excitement, avoid commitment, and keep their options open. They're the ones with Instagram feeds full of travel photos, dating profiles that emphasize adventure, and shopping habits that promise the next purchase will finally satisfy them. Sound familiar? Modern culture pushes aesthetic living hard. Every app, advertisement, and social media platform promises more stimulation, more novelty, more options. But Kierkegaard saw the problem. People living aesthetically are actually running from deeper questions about who they really are and what they truly want. Eventually, many people move to the ethical stage, the world of responsibility, commitment, and doing what's right. They get married because it's time. They advance in careers that seem respectable. They follow moral rules and meet social expectations. From the outside, this looks like maturity and success. But here's the trap Kierkegaard identified. Ethical living often becomes another form of avoidance. Instead of making authentic choices, you're still following scripts, just different ones. You marry because society says you should, not because you've chosen this specific person. You pursue a career that looks good to others, not one that fits your actual values and interests. This is where that 3 a.m. anxiety comes from. Your authentic self recognizes that you're living ethically, but not authentically. You're checking all the boxes, meeting all the expectations, but you haven't actually chosen your life. You've simply accepted the choices that seemed most acceptable. The third stage, what Kierkegaard called religious, has nothing to do with organized religion. Religious living means making choices based on your deepest values, even when those choices conflict with what others expect or what seems rational. It requires what he called a leap of faith. Not necessarily faith in God, but faith in your own authentic judgment. This is where you stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "What do I actually want to do?" You make decisions based on your genuine values rather than external approval. You accept full responsibility for creating your own direction and meaning. Why the crowd wants you unconscious. Kierkegaard had a particular hatred for what he called the crowd, and he wasn't just talking about mobs or masses of people. He meant something more subtle and dangerous, the tendency to lose yourself in collective thinking and social expectations. He famously declared that the crowd is untruth. The crowd tells you what success looks like, what relationships should feel like, what happiness means. It provides ready-made answers to complex questions about how to live. Following the crowd feels safe because you're never alone in your choices. Millions of other people are making the same decisions for the same reasons. Here's the seductive part. The crowd promises that conformity will eliminate anxiety. Follow the prescribed path, get the education, build the career, find the relationship, buy the house, and you'll find peace. But Kierkegaard realized that the crowd solutions might work for most people, but they're toxic for anyone seeking authentic existence. When you follow collective wisdom, you're choosing based on what works for the average person rather than what works for your unique situation, values, and desires. The anxiety you experience in quiet moments comes from your authentic self recognizing this betrayal. Part of you knows you're capable of more original thinking, more courageous choices, more genuine living. The discomfort signals the gap between who you actually are and who you're pretending to be for social acceptance. Think about how often you modify your opinions based on what others expect. Notice how you present different versions of yourself in different social contexts. This shape-shifting might feel like social intelligence, but it's actually a form of self-abandonment. The crowd promises relief from the burden of choice, but authentic people discover the opposite. Conformity creates deeper, more persistent anxiety because it requires constant suppression of your genuine impulses and desires. The sickness that wakes you up. Kierkegaard wrote about what he called the sickness unto death. Not a physical illness, but a spiritual condition he identified as despair. This despair emerges when people recognize the gap between their authentic potential and their actual living. The symptoms will sound familiar: feeling empty despite external success, questioning the meaning of your achievements, sensing that you're living someone else's life. You might have everything you thought you wanted, yet feel profoundly dissatisfied and anxious about continuing on your current path. Modern psychology often treats these feelings as depression requiring medication or therapy. Kierkegaard saw them as spiritual awakening requiring courage and authentic choice. The despair signals that your authentic self refuses to be ignored. The part of you that knows your genuine values and potential has grown strong enough to create discomfort with inauthentic living. This explains why successful people often feel the most lost. Their life looks perfect from the outside. They've achieved everything they were supposed to want, yet they can't shake the feeling that something essential is missing. Kierkegaard understood that this despair actually represents spiritual health. It means your capacity for authentic living hasn't been completely suppressed by social conditioning. The discomfort indicates that you still have access to your genuine self. Pay attention to what specifically triggers your deepest dissatisfaction. These triggers often point toward the areas where you've most completely abandoned your authentic values in favor of social expectations. Making the leap. Kierkegaard's most famous concept is the leap of faith, the moment when you stop analyzing and start choosing based on your authentic values. This leap requires accepting uncertainty and taking responsibility for creating your own meaning. The leap happens when you move from asking, "What should I do?" to asking, "What do I actually want to do?" Sometimes authentic choices don't make rational sense to others, but they feel absolutely right to you. Here's how to start. Begin with small experiments in authenticity. If you normally agree with everyone to avoid conflict, try expressing one genuine opinion per day. If you always choose activities that impress others, try one thing each week that you actually enjoy, regardless of how it looks. Notice where you've been living according to expectations rather than desires. Maybe you've been pursuing a promotion you don't actually want, or staying in a relationship that feels more like habit than choice. Build your tolerance for uncertainty. Authentic living requires comfort with not knowing how things will turn out. The anxiety you feel about unknown outcomes is often less painful than the anxiety of knowing you're living someone else's life. Most importantly, understand that the anxiety won't disappear, it will transform. Instead of the dull, persistent ache of inauthenticity, you'll experience the sharp, energizing discomfort of growth. That restless feeling becomes fuel for creating a life that actually fits who you are.